Okay. I guess this is actually something I saw was on your site, Jordan, but you never covered it. Do you want to skip over it, or did you just not find it? I can't decide if this is relevant or not. I saw it on some other stories too.
Oh. Yeah, it was one of those things that I have so many things that come up with the news stories that I can't possibly cover every one, or I'd have an hour-long video. So some things that may not be considered big news end up getting, that they're put in there, but they're not put into the video.
Well, and I have mixed feelings at the end of the day when it comes to that, because Moonlight is the open source. For those of you who are wondering what we're talking about, there's a project to bring GPU hardware acceleration to Moonlight, which I think will be useful. But at the end of the day, I kind of have a lackluster anything when it comes to Moonlight, because at the end of the day, it can never support the Silverlight encryption, and the majority of things you would want to load that are using the Silverlight codec, rather they're animations or sound or whatever, by default they're using that thing that for legal reasons Moonlight can't support. So it's one of those, it's a great idea, but I have a hard time ever getting excited about anything going on in Moonlight.
Agreed, entirely there.
It's legal soup making using your computer ridiculously hard, but the end result is it just doesn't work, and you don't really care why. What about Motorola half bailing on Android?
I have not seen that.
Motorola has announced, despite the fact that they were given, Honeycomb way before it was even finished, and technically it's still not finished if you listen to Google and everything else, they are deciding they're going to create their own in-house OS. They're going to kind of splinter their efforts. They're not sure they want to really invest in Android. They want to go do their own Android competitor. What's really funny about this, well, we're not sure we like this Linux OS, so we're going to go make our own Linux OS. And it's like, if your head's, whatever, but...
and the funny thing about it is, if they do what I would envision they will do, they will probably end up incorporating all that alien Dalvik stuff, just like BlackBerry's going to be doing.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we're going to have a bunch of different OSs that can all run Android apps.
Yeah, I know that. I'm waiting for HP to send out a new WebOS device. Oh, and by the way, this supports Alien Dalvik too. That is honestly where I see things going. It's like, hi, everything runs the Android. It's like
everything runs Android now, so what needs to run Android?
I'm sure exactly what Google wants to do.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm not sure they really care one way or the other there.
I think that they want it to happen. That's what Microsoft would want, and that's kind of, they would want people to use their stuff no matter what platform.
So you have to build upon them, so they are the key.
Well, and honestly, that makes the Android marketplace just that much more valuable. It's like, oh, well, if you publish your mobile app to this one marketplace, it runs everywhere but Apple. Because honestly, I don't ever see iOS saying, we support Android too. I don't ever see that happening. That will never happen. I'm sure there will be a jailbroken app for iOS that will go, Alien Dalvik now on iOS, if you jailbreak it. But I don't ever see Apple allowing that. I think that will never happen. It's like they'll go, this duplicates the iOS App Store. No. But yeah, well, no, and you're right. It's like the real question is though, if you're going to the store and you have this Motorola Zoom, and you have next to it a Motorola Zoom not running Android but running Motorola's Linux OS, which one are you going to buy? Or too early to really make an assessment on that?
I would say so. I would say it's too early.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's nice to have another Linux OS out there.
I'm with Jordan. I think Migo's like sitting on a shelf somewhere collecting dust.
Which is what I'm saying. Maybe it's nice because that stopped to have an alternative Linux OS. Just in case. Backed by a decently sized company.
Well, and honestly, though Jordan and me diametrically disagree on this, I hope Jordan's right, and I hope everybody else is right. I don't have blind faith in Google, so I'm not convinced yet. But maybe Android needs more competition on Linux versus Linux, because we still don't have the Honeycomb source code.
I think that's a good point. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's not like they aren't giving it to anybody.
Do you think Motorola will make it based on Android?
No. According to this, what they did is they actually went and bought like another Linux project. So it's one of those things. Everybody's like, wait a minute. So you're not happy with the Linux that's been given to you. You have to go buy another one. Wait a minute, and then you're gonna redevelop it. That's like, okay.
As far as you know, Android is more different from Linux than Ubuntu is different from Linux. You know, it is its completely own environment. It does run completely the Linux kernel.
It's a Linux-based OS, but the Android tree is completely a completely separate
what Android
tree.
is the Android environment, which is all a virtual machine. It's all Java. It's
Right.
Java apps running inside a Java environment. So it's not. It is its wholly own thing. It's not. It's not things running directly on. It's not things running directly on your computer in the same way, using libraries the same way that running things on Ubuntu is. It's not doing that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, and like you're saying with Alien Dalvik, it's a sign on whether or not that's even us. Interesting enough, I still wonder why Oracle's suing Google, but they're not suing Alien Dalvik. It's like they clearly know there is no overlap here, but they just want to go after Google because Google has money. It's like, okay, Joe. Now you made me forget where we are. We were getting in. Oh, Honeycomb. The thing is, it's going to be open. Everybody's saying, well, they'll release it after Ice Cream Sandwich, which I'm hoping's right. But it's one of those things. What I find really annoying here is one of the big complaints about Android already is that Google basically gives all the stuff you need to develop it to their preferred partner. Like in the case of Honeycomb, Motorola was involved in pretty much every step of the way once Google had an idea of what they were making, which gave them this 6 to 18 month lead time ahead of everybody else. And that's not really fair. It's almost anti-competition. And now it's even with Honeycomb, there's this precedent. It's like, okay, we've given it to Motorola. Now that Motorola's got the zoom out, we're giving it to other select pre-approved partners. But we're like drawing this line. Okay, if you're not above this threshold, you're just not going to be able to make a Honeycomb thing. And it's one of those. It's like I get the idea of wanting to have some consistency and keep people from putting Honeycomb on devices that should never be running Honeycomb, but I'm like, who's to say a true independent or hacker, doesn't have a device they want to Frankendroid into a, Honeycomb. And you can't do it. It's one of those. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Does anyone really think that those crappy Android devices that some people put out really hurt Android that much as far as the phones? I mean, the tablets did because they came out first. But, after the good Android phones came, did anyone, think that those hurt? Because people already knew it could do better. I think it hurts only when it comes first and there's no other choice. They think that that's what it's capable of. But once better things are there, they blame the manufacturer, not the OS.
Yeah, it's like
As they should.
Well, no, and it's like that. I mean, honestly, if like that that piece of crap you took back to Kmart, Jordan, because that's what they're trying to prevent. They're trying to prevent those people from loading honeycomb on that, or a phone equivalent of that. But it would be a crappy user experience. The device would suck. Jordan, if they did that, would you say the device sucks, or would you say honeycomb sucks?
I would say the device sucks, period.
Yeah,
but I said that before.
The person to ask, you would want to ask.
Well, it's not like their point isn't entirely unjustified, because we sit here and say, like, we were saying all of those devices suck because they're trying to run a faux OS on a tablet form factor. It's just not a good combination. This is one of those things we assume everybody just knows, but over the holidays, there were a number of people who were like looking to go buy tablets, and they're like, well, I hear bad things about this, and I hear something. I go, well, of course you're hearing bad things about that. That's a phone OS running on a slate device. It's on a device that was never made to run it, and it's on. Wait till this month when all of these things have come out, and then go take a look at your options and so on. And this was like news to them, and I was surprised this was news to them. But when I take an honest step back, the marketing implies that what they're selling you was made to work that way, even though it never was. You would think from the Galaxy advertisements that it was running honeycomb or an OS like honeycomb, even though it wasn't. So maybe that's what they're afraid of, that people won't be able to tell the difference because they'll never try. Because the one constant with all these crap devices is they're cheap. I think the average price for them is like $50, right?
For which one?
Like these just POS knockoff should never be running.
The one that I picked up a while back was the one I picked up a while back was 180.
That was
the one I picked up more recently was 140 or 120 out the door, I think.
Wow.
But I've seen it as low as like 70 or 80.
Yeah, the 70 or 80. The 50 to 100 is where I would expect all those devices to ultimately wind up, because they really are POSs. They're not.
If you can get it for less than $100 for a basic web browsing device, basic application. No.
See, that is the other reason I find a line with this. Do I ever expect a $50 to $100 device to perform like a $1,000 device? Hell no. That ain't ever going to happen. But if the $50 to $100 device is all you need, it's a way for them to get their foot in the door and something they can afford to go, well, I'm willing to just screw around at that price point and see if maybe I want to actually invest or not. And I don't think just cutting this magical floor and saying, you don't meet this, screw off, I don't think that's good for Android in the long run. I think it actually could hurt it. So, I don't know. But you both think they're not really closed sourcing it. It's going to be open. It's just going to take time. Okay. I guess last little short thing. We've covered this I don't know how many times. And people still do it. Anyone of you want to start on this?
It's just the standard. People want Linux to be like Windows. We don't have.
Some people want Linux to be like Windows.
Yeah, that's the thing. Every 6 to 40 months, this project gets underway that basically takes this mentality. The only thing wrong with Linux is it doesn't work exactly like Windows. If everything in Linux worked exactly like Windows, it would people would love it. And they do this. They turn Linux into Windows. They skin it. They make all these tweaks. They actually give it a C drive and a D drive. And they do all these things. And the project bounces around for 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, and it just dies because nobody wants it. It's like the Linux community doesn't want it. People who are not, most of the people who are going to Linux don't want it. You can't really get a feel for working with a Linux or Unix-like system if you're still thinking in the C drive mentality. You just, because that isn't the file structure of Linux. It's not how it works. It's root / yada yada.
I don't think that that's exactly what he means, though. He means, I mean, of course, there may be people like that, but, most of the people, when they say they wish Linux worked like Windows, is they want their programs on Windows to work on Linux and stuff, like all their games and stuff. And that's the main thing. That's the main, that their programs work differently or don't exist on Linux that exist on Windows. Because Linux, as far as the GUI, really doesn't take any extra learning. Every complaint that I've seen that was really valid and not trolling was just that a program that they want doesn't work on Linux, namely iTunes and a few others.
Well, and at the end of and iTunes, there's Linux tried for years. Every time Wine got iTunes working, Apple released an update that had no other purpose than to break it. And they just we're tired of dedicating resources to making something that they're just going to immediately break the second we get it working. It's like they got tired of it. They just... there was no point in dedicating resources to something Apple clearly did not want. That they were going to go out of their way to break every time they did it. And honestly, I'm a big proponent, actually, of a different Windows license. And that is a Windows virtual machine license or a virtual layer license, in which I don't need the Windows OS, I don't need all of these things. Basically something like Crossover, but that's made by Microsoft. It can be entirely closed source. It can be, I give Microsoft $20 to $50 to create a layer that is actually that layer. It's actually Microsoft's layer. Because for legal reasons, partly because of the legal soup that goes into software patents and everything, Wine and the Crossover project can never fully emulate Windows. They could write the code to do it, but they'd be in violation of patents Microsoft owns. Legally, they're not allowed to fully emulate it. And the only way you're ever going to get a full emulation is if Microsoft sells you that product.
Microsoft would probably do that if they actually saw their own OS start to fall. I'm sure that. Microsoft, when it's dying, it fights very hard, and it starts grabbing onto everything that's working and saying, here, take my hand, take my hand.
Yeah, well, no, I honestly see that. If Windows ever starts to, really erode in market share, and there's some powder kegs setting up in the next few years that could actually make a major dent in Windows market share. Literally, it could, fall by leaps and bounds over a course of as little as 5 years.
Who's the first to make that prediction? I'm just saying.
No. Well, I'm referring more to the fact, like what we were talking about in PC versus Mac. What a lot of people are wondering with HP putting all their backing in WebOS right now, Microsoft might be stupid and issue Hewlett-Packard an ultimatum. And if they do that, Hewlett-Packard's a company that isn't a strong enough position to just go F you, Microsoft. If short of something like that happening, short of Dell or Hewlett-Packard going, you know what, we're not going to make Windows systems anymore because Microsoft's fucking with us. Short of that, no, I don't see Microsoft just eroding. I see it taking 20, 30 years, if not more, at the rate things are currently going with Linux and Apple and other
20
things.
20 or 30 years, that's...
Yeah, I know. No, I know. We can't even really predict out that far in this industry. It's like...
computers stop doubling in 2029.
You keep bringing up Moore's Law ending. Talk to me and...
Yeah. Make those long predictions, there's a huge change coming.
No, I know that, but in my lifetime, I don't know about yours, Jordan, they've told me 3 times Moore's Law was going to end. And every time we figure out, oh wait, no it isn't. It's like...
Yeah, when they did that, it was 2020, now it's 2029, but
We know there's an end.
So Ben, you predict 30 years. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and there is quantum computers and there is things to go on, but there's shifts of magnitudes that are amazing that, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something completely different by that time.
Well, and you know, for all we know, 10 years from now, somebody will create a new revolutionary way to interact with computers on an OS we've never heard of, and they'll all die. It's like...
Which, you know, anyway, but for a long, it's hard.
No, and I get... Anyways, back to the complaint that Linux isn't Windows. You know, at the end of the day, that's... if they're not talking about it doesn't work like these, like if you're talking about they just want their software to work, at the end of the day, who they should really be bitching to, because that's actually one of the things Linux has gone, in the open source community, they've gone out of their way to make that transition as easy as possible and make as much of that stuff that they can just work over here. You know, that's why projects like Wine and Crossover, which then pushes back up to Wine and so forth, exist. And those things actually worked their way over into the Mac. You know, you now have Darwine and so on. And you know, it made adopting OS X easier too. Those projects exist because of developers that don't want to cater. And I have really mixed feelings about whose fault this is, but at the end of the day, I honestly got to blame it on the companies that just aren't developing their products cross-platform. You know, they're just developing them for thing one. And I realize that takes money and that takes resources, and they have to...
What if someone told you that you had to develop for Windows?
Somebody told me that I had to develop for Windows based on...
Or that, you know, something like that. Like you, say someone really liked IE6, and they told you that you had to make your web page work in IE6 because it doesn't work, you know?
I would explain that the following things aren't going to work in IE6, but based on the market metrics that IE6 still does have at least a 20% share, I think that's justified. If they think that...
So you would try to change it?
I'll do it, but I'm gonna explain that the following things are on. I've had clients do that. I will make it work with IE6 if it's one of the requirements. I don't do that by default because there's so many things you can't do in IE6 that you can do in the modern web. You wind up with a very minimalistic web page because there's just been so many improvements to the languages that drive the internet since IE6 came out. You know, and IE6 doesn't know what to do with any of these things. It's just, but you know, and I explained to them.
Developers could feel like that, you know.
Well, and at the end of the day, part of the job when you're making any project is to, you know, point out, you know, the following. Oh, well, you know, if we just made this little tweak in this process here, by default, it would be that way naturally. Yeah, you know, it's. There are ways to develop where you can be cross-platform without making mountains out of molehills. Now, it means doing some things a little differently, but I've always had a hard time understanding how turning away customers is in a company's best interest. And I guess this goes back to the general logic of, you know, Linux people won't buy anything. That's... And actually, wasn't it all that long ago Adobe announced like they weren't going to be actively pursuing Linux development anymore, so we're probably never going to get a Linux version of the Creative Suite? Or was that just a rumor? Do you know on that, Jordan?
There have been several petitions lately that have actually had a lot of steam, and people in talks with Adobe developers who have been saying, if you guys get enough people behind it, we'll see what we can do. Okay. And I think they are actively pursuing several products at this point, but I don't know if they've got anything really on the way.
Okay. Well, no, because I mean, it's like, just because we're a Linux user doesn't mean we expect to not have to pay for anything.
I'm hoping that the Ubuntu Software Center with paid applications and people doing that and buying that, people
I both love and hate the Ubuntu Software Center because I don't want Ubuntu to become the standard for all Linux OSs.
I agree. Yeah, but I like the Software Center. When I'm on Ubuntu, it's great. It's in fact the best thing about Ubuntu, I will say.
Oh yeah, there's a number of people who have started telling me why PC Linux sucks. Number one, does not have the Ubuntu Software Center.
I mean, it's, even on Mint, the Ubuntu Software Center has problems running because it actually checks that you're running Ubuntu before running it, so you actually have to change something in a config file to make it work on Mint to say, hey, I'm Ubuntu.
See, that's my problem with it. I don't want a world where people developing for Linux only submit the only place you can get it is the Ubuntu Software Center. Because then it's like, no, I'm not running Linux. I have to be running Ubuntu. I'm like, I don't want to run Ubuntu. I want to run my Linux distro. It's like I don't want that world. Oh, well, we develop for Linux. We support Ubuntu. It's like.
What I'm hoping is that'll at least create the momentum, and then people will maybe start putting it in a way that that could work.
There was an idea just a couple of months ago. The developers that got together in Germany and said they were going to take the Software Center front end and put it on a software build service back end. So perhaps the long term will be, yes, you'll use the Software Center to buy your applications, but they'll go through this build service where you can get it for whatever distro you want.
That would be nice.
So it'll repackage it for whatever. Now, the interesting thing.
Software Center on other OSs, so like when you use it on PC Linux OS, for instance.
I would use that, and I'll also just download.
Jordan, like, would that be how it would work, or?
Yeah, that was the whole idea. You could get your packages from your own distribution, or you could go through this build service, kind of like like Click and Run used to be with Linspire.
Right.
You'd go out there, you'd say, I want this application. It says you're on this distro. Here's the way you get this application. I would assume they could add anybody to take that.
The only thing. Yeah, the only thing I would have on that is what's the process for getting your distro as one of the recognized distros? Because it's like, because inevitably there's going to be user X who's going to run into my distro is not officially on this list because they didn't think to add it, and it's one of those like, okay, which like I go there, it's like I'm running this distro. Oh well, because at the end of the day, there's only so many bases, and really really.
Of the top 10 distros, of the distros that are not in the top 10, which of them are not based on one of them in the top 10?
I have yet to come across one that's really, that's anything other than an in-house solution that doesn't fall in that criteria. So at the end of the day, all it would be is, they like, oh, we didn't think to add that one to this list, and they'll then make that little tweak to the system.
Basically, because most of them, it'll just, it should be easy to get to support, because you only have to support a few bases that people use.
Yep. Well, and admittedly, as of late, one of the distros that's really growing as a good base is actually Jordan's favorite, Arch. There's a lot of Debian bases, and there's a whole lot of Arch-based distros. Like, I've been looking at a lot of things I didn't realize were Arch-based are Arch-based, and I'm like, whoa! It's like I think there might be as many, in some cases more, than Debian bases, and that surprised me, to be quite honest. It's like,
I haven't seen how many Arch-based ones.
Arch is one of the things that I'm considering to switch to. I'm planning to switch, but I kind of want to wait until 10.11.04 comes out, because I'm going to compare a few different things, because I'm planning to switch from Linux Mint 9 to something new and completely reinstall. I have all my stuff backed up. I'm just waiting.
Right.
Actually,
the things I'm considering. It looked very interesting. Looked like I would learn a lot.
Last night I actually just reinstalled my laptop. I had Linux Mint on it, and I went to Arch. But instead of going the traditional route and just putting GNOME on it, I said, you know what? I want GNOME Shell. I want to just try it out and see where it stands right now, since I'm reinstalling anyway. So I found through the wiki the way to get it, and as a part of getting it, you enable the testing repo, which gave me the newest kernel available that's stable.
Nice.
So my laptop is bleeding edge right now.
Real state of the art.
So I definitely do want to try that out sometime. I don't know if it's going to be my next thing to try out. Maybe I'm going to have a
At the end of, I actually like some Arch too, but as far as I know, there is no way to make Arch a real true rolling distro, is there?
Arch is 100% rolling.
It's 100% rolling. Okay.
Can you make a Arch share, like,
No.
is there automatic tool booting?
Yeah, that actually, rolling was the wrong word to use there. What I was referring more to is there a way to like automate the rolling check, like where you're not going in, where you you can hand control over that to something like Synaptech or something.
Oh, an auto updater.
Yeah.
There used to be one. I think it's kind of frowned upon, but there's probably something in UR.
I don't want it to just do it automatically, but I want to get like a little
What's available.
Hey, there's BLAW updates available. You might want to update. Because depending what I'm doing at the time, I don't necessarily want to run updates right now because it might screw stuff up. But I don't want to have to go check every BLAW days for updates.
Right. I'd be willing to bet there probably is something like that out there. It's just something I haven't bothered with.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that it's the update schedule, especially in open source, is at best irregular. That's a kind way of saying.
Pack update SVN. So it's in the AUR. I don't know as far as what it can do and what it is, but a simple update notifier for Arch Linux. You can see if it's marked out of date or anything. Oops. Anyway, continue.
I just viewed the April Fool's joke on DistroWatch. I won't ruin it for anyone, but
yeah, I am not looking forward to the fact that April Fool's is fixing to start.
I'm looking forward for it.
Well, I did something about it last year. I just don't feel like it this year. I'm tired.
Yeah. Anything else you want to go into, or do we want to kind of stop off there?
That's funny. Any of you guys look at it?
The DistroWatch thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it earlier. There's one on OMG Ubuntu also.
I'll check it later. Hey, you know, on that note, what would be the what would be like the theme? Like, if you were gonna decorate for April Fools, what would you do? Would you just put gesture hats everywhere? Or like,
if you were gonna decorate for it?
Yeah.
Take something you would normally do or be, say, go the other direction. So for me, instead of having all the penguins in the background, I should have like little window panes or what's a Mac logo? Tigers and leopards and cat things.
You could just have a bowl of silver apples on the table.
I could just be eating an apple into that.
You'd probably get sued for inferring. It's like, and on that sickness, unless there's anything else we want to go into.
I'm good.
Okay. And signing out.